I think what Donald Trump is really trying to do is be pro-family. I think what I have said is that we want our country to be more pro-family. There are, though, policy positions behind my view that the country should become more pro-family. It's become way too expensive to raise a family in this country. You have a lot of young women today who say they'd like to have more children, but for some reason, health or financial, they're not able to. We want to try to solve that problem.
In the 7 weeks since J.D. Vance accepted the nomination for vice president on the Republican ticket, that has been his pitch. He is pro-family. He will make the Republican ticket more pro-family. And he has policy solutions to remove the economic barriers preventing America from becoming more pro-family. Last night at a Turning Point Action event in Arizona, MAGA pundit Charlie Kirk gave J.D. Vance a chance to put a little detail on those policies.
It's very hard for working families to get by. How will we lower the cost of daycare?
It's such an important question, Charlie. And I think one of the things that we can do is make it easier for family models to choose, or for families to choose whatever model they want, right? So one of the ways that you might be able to relieve a little bit of pressure on people who are paying so much for daycare is make it so that maybe like grandma or grandpa wants to help out a little bit more, or maybe there's an aunt or uncle that wants to help out a little bit more. If that happens, you relieve some of the pressure on all the resources that we're spending in daycare.
Grandma and grandpa, they're so much cheaper than childcare. Why didn't we think of that? There are a couple problems with this. First of all, not every new dad or new mom has a living parent. Secondly, many millennial and Gen Z parents are moving away from their home bases in large part because housing has gotten so expensive. A recent Pew Research Center study shows only 55% of Americans live within an hour's drive of their extended family. And the 55% of Americans who do live close to their parents might encounter a different problem. Their parents are often still working because either they want to or because they have to, which means that dropping everything to watch the grandkids actually comes at a cost. J.D. Vance himself knows something about this. Remember this old J.D. Vance interview, which resurfaced last month?
It makes him a much better human being to have exposure to his grandparents.
Well, I don't know.
And the evidence on this, by the way, is like super clear.
That's the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female.
Okay, set aside for 1 second J.D. Vance agreeing that the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female is to watch her grandkids, which is just, okay, J.D. Vance. That exchange was about Vance's mother-in-law taking a year-long sabbatical from her post as a molecular biology professor so that she could look after J.D. Vance's children. And this shouldn't even bear explaining, but not every working grandparent is a biology professor who can temporarily or permanently leave their job to watch the grandkids. Many of them aren't even able to retire until after age 75. But according to J.D. Vance, the federal fix for daycare costs is to phone grandma, the postmenopausal female. That's her purpose. As for his running mate, Donald Trump, he detailed his own, plan to lower child care costs earlier today.
If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make child care affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. I was we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, because look, child care is child care. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations.
Child care is child care. You have to have it. The Trump-Vance plan for rising child care costs is make the grandparents watch your kids. Never mind the fact that a lot more Americans are working a lot longer. A 2022 survey found that over 40% of Americans between the ages of 55 and 64 did not even have a retirement account, which probably makes it somewhat challenging to drop everything and go babysit. Joining me now is Maya Wiley, President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Maya, it galls me that the Republican Party proposes itself to be the party of the working class that understands the economy. And you have literally the vice presidential nominee out there proposing a solution that has nothing to do with the economic hardships faced by working people in this country.
They actually have nothing to do with understanding what most people in this country's lives are like.
Yes,
it's like when George Bush ran and didn't understand how cashiers worked at the grocery store, right? You're like, where do you live and who do you talk to? Because I'm sorry, it's both. They want to raise the retirement age for Social Security benefits, the thing that half of Americans have to rely on in order to retire and then maybe be a caretaking grandparent.
Yes.
Or what about if your mom gets Alzheimer's?
Right.
Or your dad has a stroke? Then what are you supposed to do? Not only that, what if you moved away from your family because you couldn't afford the housing? The two most expensive costs of living for parents is housing and child care. And, you know, I'm sorry, what about the woman who is working in a pre-K as a teacher, earning $40,000 a year with her own young child, and she can't even afford the tuition for her own young child in the program she's teaching in, but you want to tell her that her problem is that she had to get an education.
Yeah.
So maybe you have cats. I don't know. I do.
I have two little ones, and I love my mom, but she's not going to be a full-time caregiver for them. I feel like this statement on the part of Vance is so important to unpack because it hits at everything you're talking about. It hits at the social safety net, which Republicans want to gut. I think it's something like there's a vast number of retirees that depend on Social Security benefits for 90% of their income, right? They want to slash those. They do not care about health care in any meaningful way. If your parent has a stroke and is a designated child care giver, what do you do then? There's the cost of housing that this is like obviously numb to. And then there's just the fundamental, like, you know, equity.
It's making up a fantasy about life in America.
Yeah.
A fantasy you wish was true and real. Because my biggest fantasy after starting my family was that my mom would be living at home with us, and we did a 3-generation household, and she got Alzheimer's.
Right.
Right? And look, I was one of the lucky ones because we had a 2-paycheck family and could pay for childcare. You know, in the de Blasio administration, when I was counsel to the mayor, you know, when we were doing the analysis on creating universal pre-K, we knew we were putting $5,000 a year back in the pockets of families. It was an income inequality strategy that also benefited the educational futures of children. That's called problem solving that understands what people's lives are
actually like.
What they want to do is create a fantasy and then force us to figure out how to eat, pay the rent, and get some good care for our kids without any help.
Well, with no federal solution to a structural problem in our economy. The other part of it that's so weird that keeps happening with J.D. Vance is his obsession with controlling women, right? It's the role of the postmenopausal female. It's the role, his recent jag about how women need to be having babies earlier, his obsession with when and how and if women have bear children, the concerns he has about declining fertility. I mean, all of this paints a very sort of odd, dare I say, weird portrait of a man who is at once obsessed with the control of women's bodies, but is completely out of touch in terms of the realities of them.
And has a working wife.
Yes.
As he denigrates women who choose to work.
And a working grandparent.
And a working grandparent who is a faculty member. It's like, what world do you want? Because really what it sounds like is you want it all. And that means women are stuck with nothing. But it's also what is exactly so alienating about it. Because take child care. 95% of people were either owning a child care facility or working in one is a woman.
Yeah.
And yet those child care facilities are making 1% profit. They're working poor. The women working in those facilities are the working poor.
Right.
They're working and they're poor. I mean, what does that tell us about this fantasy about women performing these jobs and also the fantasy about work and then and then the denigration of women who've actually figured out a way to make it work.
It's so
I mean, where
true.
it's like, we're going to penalize you no matter what.
Yes.
And you and I know this because people who look like us have always worked and had to raise kids and had to raise other people's kids.
And our moms worked, too.
And our moms worked. And
Even when they were postmenopausal.
Right.
I got to ask, because before we got into the segment, we played some sound of Donald Trump offering an absolutely garbled, completely incoherent answer on how to lower the cost of childcare. At the end, he gets applause because it's, I don't know, they felt bad for him. Honestly, it's completely meandering and nonsensical. And I guess I wonder, like, does it not, like, does the absence of policy, does the absence of true connection with the struggles of working class Americans, does the utter incoherence and mendacity of this platform really just no longer matter to any of its adherents?
Clearly. Or they wouldn't be adherents. But I think this is the thing. I think there are a lot of people starting to say, wait, what? Project 2025, you want to end Head Start programs? So we're talking about childcare. That blueprint, that plan that was created by Trump administration officials, as well as that base, actually has a plan that is very clearly making sure that regular folks, without regard to their politics, don't get what they need. But here's the other thing. It isn't working. And there are a lot of people starting to scratch their heads and go, what? And I think one of the things we have to address is the double standard in the media and the coverage. Because let's face it, that was incoherent. Why aren't we talking about his cognitive abilities to be president?
Well, listen, we try. We're trying, Maya. We try to talk about his cognitive abilities. He will be putting them on center stage on Tuesday night at the debate in Philadelphia.